Roundtable Forum series at New South Wales Parliament House, and a resounding welcome to everybody who's made it through the fog and sleet and the long queue out front. The Roundtable Forum series of meetings have been held at New South Wales Parliament House for the last 11 and a half years, and we've had subjects covering almost every important topic you can possibly think of. And I'll just introduce the group and the concept. Now the topic, as advertised, is the patriots versus the elites. I'll repeat that one. Some people think it's a bit ambiguous, but it's not. The patriots versus the elites is a world topic of world importance, as you'll realise if you browse the news. Now, our panel of 4 speakers are Peter Spencer, farmer and activist, John Macrae, engineer, miner and patriot, Dr. Sian Turnbull, prolific author on capitalism, and Mr. Julian King, researcher in social anthropology, environmental science and geology. And they will speak in that order, and questions will be invited from members of the audience, that's you, when all 4 speakers have completed, and not until they have completed, and there'll be only 1 question per customer. That's a strict rule, so that we get to acknowledge everyone who wants to say anything. Keep your questions short, sharp and snappy. Now the Roundtable Forums are organised by Western Heritage Australia, and that's a long-established discussion and study group, and our aim is to raise consciousness and public awareness on all issues which are maybe of concern and interest to thinking people, and that's you, I hope. And the motto is, we serve truth, not consensus. So we're not concerned about being controversial, we know we are. We've got no connection whatever to any political party, religious organisation, cult or business of any kind whatsoever. All monies are public, all monies collected are spent on the rental of this venue, publicity and the internet. We're strictly non-profit, and we're an amateur show in every sense of the word, and we're proud of this, upholding the tradition of the amateur. No opinions expressed by the speakers or by the audience necessarily reflect the views of Western Heritage Australia, the sponsoring organisation, which is a study group. Each person here speaks for himself alone. And some of our topics over the past 11 years I'll read a selection of that later. Now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I'll tell you a bit about him. That's Peter Spencer. Peter Spencer was born in southern New South Wales at Tumut and raised in the high country of Australia, predominantly on the maternal family property located between Tumbarumba and Kiandra, Southern Alps. After spending 3 years in the UK on paternal family farm and travelling around the world, he went to Papua New Guinea in 1972. He found the country culturally fascinating, subsequently became very involved in exploration and research. Over the next 30 years, his work amongst the tribes was recognised and respected across tribal boundaries and language groups. The nation boasts, this is New Guinea, boasts 848 languages and 8,000 dialects. His knowledge and deep interest in the tribal societies was recognised by Prime Minister Pius Wingti as a real asset, who even knowing full well Spencer was a foreigner, appointed him as a press secretary, followed by elevation to the office of Chief of Staff and eventually Principal of the Office of the Prime Minister of New Guinea. His paper on Third World Governance, the Law and Order Policy in Papua New Guinea, complete with which Professor Paul Wilson of Bond University reviewed and said even though he had written over 32 books on the subject, he found Spencer's work the best yet. Following Spencer's return to Australia in 1997, he was to take up a position as visiting fellow at Deakin University in Victoria, sponsored by Imataz Omar of the Constitutional Law Faculty. Imataz believed Peter's contribution was required at Deakin. Spencer wanted to do his PhD on the institution of tribalism. Peter's academic dreams had to be abandoned as unfortunately his beloved land in the mountains, with 3 peaks over 5,000 feet incorporating alpine ash forests, became subject to new laws affecting its use. The Australian government required the vegetation on Peter's property to meet its international treaty under the Kyoto Protocol. Peter's life since 1997 has been a tragedy, a desperate struggle with over 200 appearances in court, all to try and obtain just terms for his loss, which is also the loss of rights of all landowners, and approximately 30,000 of them with a substantial impact on their property use and over all rights. Since the loss of Peter's land, his wife has lived in Denmark with 2 of their children, and 4 remaining children living in the USA. The court proceedings, the struggle is ongoing. So I'd like you to welcome Mr. Peter Spencer, please.
Thank you. I said a few minutes ago how magnificent this room is. You walk into it for the first time and it quite takes your breath away. It's such a pity those that occupy it cannot have the same thing said about themselves. Mind you, they do take my breath away, but for totally different reasons. I want to say something before I start. And I gave this considerable thought the last 3 days. I want somebody to stand up in this room, a chap called John Wilson. Would you stand up, John? Does everybody know this man? This man is an Australian icon. I'll say it again. This man is an Australian icon. This man is a 2-legged institution. He, along with another lady, and JW initials as well, June Weston, who has her snout into property and councils. She's now 91. You still can't stop her. But John has, for 30 years, pursued an avenue to try and bring back some resemblance of common law to restore to this country what we all believe it has, or it did, supposed to have. Now, as was just said, for the last 13 years I've been involved in a struggle. Unlike John, who throws eggs at judges, I had to proceed without being called vexatious. Because when I was told I couldn't farm my land, I didn't go and do anything to it. I sued the government for taking that right away from me. So they had nothing to sue me for. And I set about going to do this. When I lost the farm, my wife decided to go back to Denmark because she was a practicing pharmacist, where here she couldn't practice. So as we had no money, on the 7th of May 2007, she flew back to Denmark with the 2 youngest boys. And I said, I'll be there in 6 months. It'll only take 6 months. I'm still here. My second youngest son came out 2 months ago to hear the latest judgment. Stayed 6 weeks. I have spent, with him and his younger brother, 6 weeks out of 10 years. The loss of my home in mountains that I was raised in has always been hard for me. I have never gone back since the day the sheriff removed me, and I cannot drive south of Canberra or north of Bega because the mountains that are my mountains are so high you can see them from right across the Monero anywhere you approach it. I haven't seen that view for 10 years. It took me 7 years just to take the ash down from the mountain and adze it, to put the 8-metre beams up in the family room. They're 12 inches deep, 8 inches wide. I adzed them every week for all those years to make sure they didn't move. I bought the stove from Spain, the boiler from Denmark. I put double glazing when it didn't exist in the mountains. The house, even though it would be a metre of snow outside, would always be lovely inside. It was my home. It was never going to be for sale. Well, so much for being your castle. It certainly wasn't that. And I never thought I wouldn't be there. I didn't do it to sell it. My children would live in it. It was 20,000 acres. It had a variable altitude of nearly 3,000 feet within the boundary. 5 hills over 5,000 feet high. It had all types of different geographic points of interest and fascination. It wasn't a sheep farm. It wasn't a wheat farm. Every altitude had a different offering. Now, enough of that. John, through difficulties he had with the banks, did not take long to appreciate that in cahoots with the new aristocracy, the rights of property were gone, that these thieves took everything over, and with the jury being abolished, and mind you, they wouldn't have got away with it if the jury had not been abolished, they could run riot and do what they liked. If you recall, and I'm glad you're all of a certain age, some of you a little bit younger, but most in this room will remember something called Magna Carta. If you're still at school, you won't, because they don't teach it anymore. It's stupid. You don't learn nonsense like that. It's fairy tale stuff. But for those that recall, of us that do recall, 800 years ago at Runnymede, the people were fed up with losing their rights, their land, their money, the king taking what he liked. So they grabbed hold of King John and decided they were going to hang the bastard. Now, he agreed, after a lot of bickering, that he would sign an agreement, that he wouldn't do this, that he would follow certain rules, and these rules were refined with time. And many, through history, have seen this structure, this institution, called the jury, as being one of the greatest institutions that mankind has ever put together, whichever way you look at it. And without that as the cornerstone institution, all our other institutions wouldn't hold water. You wouldn't be able to own property if it wasn't for the jury, because they could just take it off you. And that's exactly what they did. They took juries away. And even when they had them, they weren't structured the way they were supposed to be, which is 12 peers of your equals. The judge still tried to dictate the terms of the court, but they made sure the jury was gone before they attacked the property. Because once they brought laws down of their choosing, we call them statute laws, not common law. The moment they started to put statute laws together, as one Judge Macrae said in regard to how they can put them together, if they put a law together to say all the blue-eyed babies could be put to death, then so be it. Now, if that doesn't tell you what a statute law is, then I'll say it again. That's the nonsense of it. Common law wasn't suitable to the aristocracy. And the aristocracy wasn't necessarily King John. The aristocracy was the elite. And that brings us to the discussion tonight, doesn't it? Nationalism versus the elite. Well, look at the world today. Just look at it. Now, I want you to not forget John Wilson and June Weston. June with property, John with juries. But John's still strong on property. But John understands the pivotal, absolute essential octopi structure of juries. And the sadness is, and I only said this to John a couple of days ago, what I don't understand is this. If you were a leader of a nation, if you had the vision to take your people to where they needed to go, why would you not want them to have the best justice could offer, so they would be happy people? Why is it that if you were leading the herd and you knew you had to get them over that snow-covered mountain range, down through the gullies across the roaring rivers, into a lovely lush green valley where the young could be born safely, and where each generation improved those institutions so that that road to nobility, wherever it was made clearer, was made straighter, was being more dependable. For some reason, mankind, who unlike animals does not incorporate his knowledge by instinct, has to receive that knowledge intergenerationally. I'll say it again. Has to receive that knowledge intergenerationally. Someone has to teach it to them. And I don't mean teach them about which toilet you're going to use because you're not sure what you've got between your legs. No. I'm saying the little red schoolhouse down the road, which didn't leak, it had a little desk with an inkwell in it, and you had a pencil with a little razor to sharpen it, and the teacher got up to front with a big chalkboard, and guess what she did? She taught. And all it took was a little bit of money we could scrape together to give her. But did those kids come out of that little red schoolhouse knowing what knowledge was? Knowing how to read, how to write, and how to do arithmetic. That's all it took. There wasn't all this hassle about the budget and whether you had another extra 50 million on top of her salary to get whatever else she doesn't need. Just stand there, lovely teacher, and write on that blackboard. Love those kids. And send them packing out of that classroom with their little bags bulging with knowledge. But one thing while you've got them, tell them about the jury. Tell them about those men at Runnymede and those women. Tell them about the road that men like John Wilson have walked to bring these issues home to us who think our bloody freedoms come up with the sun every morning. Well, they don't. They don't. As Jefferson said, if you don't protect those liberties with all you've got, and he even meant and intended that blood would be spilt to protect them, and that too was necessary. But if you're not prepared to do that, you don't deserve them. So my question here tonight is, why is nobody getting off their arse and leaving it all to John Wilson? There's 22 million of us. And John Wilson. This is something all of us have to get a little more passionate about, or we're going to lose the lot. We are very close. When you start to get members of Parliament who want to chase for 2 weeks in Parliament to increase the tax on backpackers' pay, or when they can't even make a decision on management without giving all the gas to overseas companies and forgetting 22 million Australians, then you realise you've got a pack of nonsense, two-legged fools running the country. And they've been doing it since Federation. A little country like Singapore, no resources, no land, and yet there's $100,000 in the bank for every Singaporean. Why? Because they don't have fools running the country. Fools! They've done nothing, been nowhere. 50 years ago, half the members of Parliament were farmers. Some of the best field practitioners in the world. Every time they left the homestead, they had to make decisions as to how to get back. These fools in Parliament today wouldn't even know how to make a hot dog, let alone a pot of tea. They wouldn't know how to boil the water. This is embarrassing. It's real easy. You call your secretary in and your minister and you say, gentlemen, we have no money. So your department's cut by 10% this year, and if you don't get it done, I'll get a new secretary. And next year it'll be the same. We're going to have half the public service we have then. We maybe can afford it. We're out of our depth. We don't have the money. So how can you keep on doing it? We don't have the money. Stop spending. Half the bloody population is public servant, for God's sake. Come on. Now, just the two subjects of tonight. We must look at the world. What's happened in America? What's happened in Europe with England and France? France was interesting. Both the old aristocratic parties lost. The new one and the Le Pen, who won more than they've ever won, showed the people are not happy. Brexit, people are not happy. United States, people are not happy with Republicans and Democrats. But look at what else. Everything Trump tries to do. He's got to have a war in Mexico. He's got to try and check who's coming into the country. He's got to try and get the cities that protect everybody when they are illegals, they won't send them back. America is like oath and slabber. There's 11 million illegals. And every time he tries to do something, they're so spoilt because they've had 100 years of Democrats and Republicans doing nothing but sticking their snout in the trough. So now that he wants to do something to protect the Americans, everybody jumps up and complains. Now, we know he's got a mouth. But that's beside the point. What the people said was they didn't want the so-called aristocracy back with their snout in the pie again. They had enough of it. Now that's happening right across the Western world. Look at what One Nation did here. As in, people are saying, we don't want the Libs. We don't want the Labour. All over the Western world, people are questioning what is available in leadership. We don't have the leadership. As I said to one person who stood for president-elect of a big organisation, and after winning, within 20 minutes, his bureaucrats had released this 3-page press statement. I rang him and said, "What, don't you have anywhere to take us? Have you got nothing to tell those that voted for you as to what you intend to do? That you've got to rely on a public service statement about the position and condition of the association? And if you have nowhere to take us, why did you stand? Where's the visionaries? Where's those that know what we need and have the balls to deliver it?" No. It's embarrassing. Even our own Prime Minister keeps referring to this country as the most multicultural country on earth. I beg your pardon. Australia is not multicultural at all. It's multi-ethnic with one culture called Australian. And we're proud of that ethnicity. We all are as a result of that ethnicity. But it's not multicultural. We are true blue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter Spencer. You haven't disappointed us. Now, I'd like now to introduce our second speaker in tonight's panel. That's Mr. John Macrae, automotive engineer, farmer, coal miner, and is in the transport industries and in the horse industries and in many other. And he will share his vision with you. Welcome, John Macrae, please.
Thank you. I'd like to carry on with something that Peter's just said about the elite and money. Before I start, I'll give you a cutout of the US extract from the USA Bankers magazine of August the 25th, 1924, how people lose their homes. Capital must protect itself in every possible manner by combination and legislation. Debts must be collected. Bonds and mortgages foreclosed as rapidly as possible. When through the process of law the common people lose their homes, they'll become more docile and more easily governed through the influence of the strong arm of government applied by the central power of wealth under the control of leading financiers. This truth is well known amongst our principal men who are now engaged in forming an imperialism of capital to govern the world. By dividing the voters through the political party system, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting over questions of no real importance, and thus by discreet action we can secure for ourselves what has been so well planned and be so successfully accomplished. They updated that in 1931 more vigorously. Now we'll talk about how they sell the elite. I classify the elite as these people that inhabit this joint here and the media. They get you to vote for them. Ring them up or ask them for a letter. You'll wait 6 months because we are the upper echelon of the governing body and you are going to be subservient to us. No matter how much tax you pay. And there's 4 things that they've done in this country. I'll show you some of the stuff. Taxes, tariffs, treaties and the family law court are all encompassed under the Marxist ideology. This thing here is the Constitution, based on common law and the Magna Carta. It's the rule book of everyone. High Court, politicians and the general public. And they're circumventing it. Treasonous behaviour. They're signing documents wrecking our secondary industries, our farming and our future. We once had the best banking system in the world, the Commonwealth Bank. Was our reserve bank. The Commonwealth Bank achieved some of the greatest achievements in the world. I'll name a couple for you. I could speak here for 24 hours, not 20 minutes. We built the longest railway line in the world, the transcontinental across Australia, 9 years. We financed the Snowy Mountain scheme. The Yanks come out and they said we were going to do this and do that. Oh, what we can do, you blokes out here, it's communist country, socialist country, you own this, you own that, we're free enterprise. We built the Hoover Dam, we can do everything. We're the greatest miners, we create records. Two young blokes come down from Queensland, their name was Thies, and they blew their records to buggery. And they couldn't get over it. Where did these fellas come from? The same Commonwealth Bank financed our Holden motor car. £1 million to Commonwealth Bank, £500,000 to Bank of Adelaide and Bank of New South Wales. Then in 1953, the elite passed the Taxation Act, where there's only two dissenters in Parliament, Clyde Cameron and Eddie Ward, who I've become very friendly with, through one of the governor of this state, Sir William McKell. His photo's just out there. And that meant in 1953 that if you were manufacturing, conducting business or investing in this country, you need not pay tax here, but tax in the country of your origin. And the elite said, this is what we're going to do. And they said the country was booming. Well, the country had to boom because there was no other country in the world had the rural produce or the rural energy or the rural activity that this country had. The Colombo plant come in and we supplied the world with machinery. And I can nominate all the machinery, all the lathe manufacturers and everything else if you want me to. I didn't read about this, I experienced it. I lived in Rosebery and I saw all the factories and all the manufacturing, knitting mills, everything. Lathe manufacturers, machinery manufacturers, milking machine everything. And the elite move in. Then we signed a thing called the Lima Declaration. But don't ever call it the Lima Declaration at law, because I'll see it doesn't exist. It's actually the UNIDO agreement, the United Nations Industry Development Organisation, signed in Lima, Peru in 1975. And that meant we'll destruct all our secondary industries to give them to other countries. I've got a copy of it here, I don't want to read it all out. And what that'll do is eradicate wars and communism. We've had more wars ever since. You know, Australia's been at war for 25 years in the Middle East. Amazing, isn't it? But the United Nations, we're going to stop all that. And under our constitution, the rule book there, our governments are not permitted to sign an agreement or a law unless it's with a sovereign country. And they're prostituting our external affairs and foreign affairs power. Now we'll start with the elite of today, how stupid they are. We've just sold the land titles off that Peter Spencer just spoke about. Where that'll end up, Christ knows. It's because once it becomes a public company, you can sell it anywhere. So now they want you to take an insurance policy out to protect your home that you already own. They sold the land titles off us for $2 billion. And the elite, the Premier, come out and said, aren't I Father Christmas? Look, I'm going to build a couple of football ovals. Don't worry about the hospitals, don't worry about the transport, don't worry about anything else. We're going to build some football and then what's left over we'll do something else with it. $2 billion, remember the $2 billion. It has a profit of $130 million a year. Costs nothing to run, money just comes in the door. To incur a debt per annum interest rate of $130 million a year, that's how interest rates are done. Anyone with bank will tell you it's all on 12 months. Of 130 million at 3%. Anyone of you got any idea how much money you can borrow at that? I'll shock you. Hang on to your seats. 4.2 billion. But we're going to sell it. We've lost the income stream, we've lost that. We can go then, we sold the lotteries, cost nothing to run, a big income stream. But the elite, the mobs in here and the public servants that get more money, fancy a branch manager, a public servant running a branch, no matter what, getting more money than the Premier. The bloke running Australia Post at a dead loss was getting 4.9 million. Our Prime Minister gets 800 million. If you were running a branch for one of the motor companies and you went to say Fred Sutton and said, look, I'm running the Arncliffe branch, I want 10 million a year. Fred would say, you're getting more than me. Oh, it doesn't matter. I want it. Well, look, there's the door what you come in when I employed you, and there's the door what you're going out. So we'll get to Nick Greiner's government. They sold out. We got the green slips. going to be cheaper because of competition. And we've got all these elite professors and everything else telling us how beneficial it's going to be. Well, what's happened to the green slips? They've skyrocketed. You'd swear by they'll go into the moon. If they think the prices have gone up quicker than the astronauts going to the moon. We sell off the generating plants, the electricity. Going to be cheaper because we're going to eradicate it. But they don't tell us it's 49% of them, as Peter alluded to, of all employment in Australia's public service. Where does 51% of the people generate enough money to keep the public service going, plus our defence, plus our welfare, plus our old age pension and everything